Hi, this is Matt with State of Flux, and February the 4th be with you. This is the 8th or 9th, it's the something retrospective of my Star Wars franchise, a look back at all the films, and we are all the way up to, trigger warning, The Last Jedi. I have a lot of thoughts about The Last Jedi, and some of them have changed since the opening night. Much like I did with The Force Awakens, I wasn't going to, but I think I'm going to read you what I wrote opening night. This was written about 2 hours after I watched this movie the day it came out, that Thursday evening. I saw the 6 o'clock advanced screening show open to the public, and this was my immediate thought of the film afterwards. For the past 40 years, Star Wars has served as a soap opera for filmgoers. A soap opera complete with radical twists, occasionally wooden acting or dialogue, and many scenes purposely devised to bring people back and keep the cycle going, and much like a soap opera, or I guess space opera, some installments are better than others. The Last Jedi doesn't break from that tradition so much as it tries to reinvent the purpose of the tradition. Why are we, as movie-going audiences, here? What is it about the Jedi and this Skywalker family that keeps us coming back? Why, after 40 years, do we still care? Rian Johnson explores these questions in his turn as director and manages to bring a strong, if uneven, film that will likely perpetuate moviegoers' desire to see more. Picking up almost exactly the moment the previous film ends, we find that the First Order is in hot pursuit of General Leia and the last fragments of the Resistance fighters. Her stalwart pilot, Poe, executes a mission that brings victory to the Resistance, but at a cost. And that cost may have brought about the end of their hope of toppling the evil Empire. Meanwhile, Rey confronts Luke, who is a splinter of the man he once was. He has disowned the Jedi ways and refuses to guide Rey in her journey, just when she needs the most guidance, because she and Kylo Ren have discovered a bond of connective tissue within the Force that binds them ever closer to each other. The film offers many great emotionally resonant scenes that are dynamic, textured, and really drive the picture. The opening space battle was fun and poppy until the weight of war set in, and it was this that set the tone for much of the rest of the film. It wasn't as exciting as a Star Wars movie usually is, but I was okay with that because this film set out to tackle something a little bit deeper than good fun in a black and white world. Much like Rogue One, this film immerses itself in the gray and really moves to explore the nature of heroism and perspective. The problems are really very few, but I can imagine how some will find them so unforgivable that they will not be able to look over them. It's funny that I say that. I'm going to pause here for a second, because I did not read a single review going in. Much like The Force Awakens and Rogue One before it, I wanted to go in completely blind. I watched the 2 trailers, and I watched the 2 trailers exactly once. If the trailers were playing in the theater, I would shield my eyes from them and not pay attention because I wanted to go in completely blind. Star Wars, especially at this point, was very, very important to me, and I wanted the surprise value of it. Star Wars was not when I grew up, there was the original trilogy, and I saw them so young that I didn't understand the concept of oh my god, what's going to happen next. So when the prequels came out, I knew exactly what to expect at any given moment. There were a couple surprises here and there, but largely they were movies that had a predictable path. I knew what was going to happen. After this point, the exciting thing with Force Awakens, to a lesser extent Rogue One, and this film was that I had no idea the trajectory of the story, and that excited me. So, I didn't read any of the reviews, which I understand were, I read them after I wrote mine, and I saw that by and large they were growing. But even here, I could predict that certain audience members were really going to have issues here. So I just thought that was kind of fun to draw attention to. Going back in. First off, let's examine the runtime. At nearly 3 hours, it is hella long, and it feels it. Something I no longer stand by. It would be one thing if it could be justified, but it really can't. You have one whole segment of a film that could easily be lifted out, and it would make for a tighter movie that would have about a 2 hour and 10-minute runtime, which is on par with the rest of the franchise, which leads to problems with story division. All the stuff with Rey, Luke, Kylo really gels. It is thought-provoking, smart, and really dissects who these characters are. The stuff with Leia, Poe, and the new Resistance leader, played wonderfully by Laura Dern, works fairly well. And left to these two plots, the film would have been contender for best of the franchise, if not the best in the franchise. Unfortunately, the random, unexciting, poorly written subplot within the Poe-Leia Holdo story thread that grinds the movie to a halt follows Finn and newcomer Rose as they travel to a casino world where they are trying to find a master locksmith for reasons. And it leads up to a really jarring action beat with political overtones of indentured servitude that fell flat for me. I'm going to stress something here. At the time, this is one of the segments that, coming back to, I really appreciated. And I'm going to cover this later, so no more interruptions. Drive through. The politics seemed somewhat forced, and the writing felt overtly prequel-y in these parts, probably by design. So much so that the action scene at the end of this segment reminded me of the opening of Attack of the Clones when Anakin and Obi-Wan are zipping around Coruscant on their speeder. It is a ground-level version of that same scene with alien racehorses. I'm trying to picture the pitch session Rian Johnson had with Lucasfilm. So, this movie is all about Luke, Rey, and Kylo. We explore the nature of the Jedi. Are they good? Why does the dark side pull so heavily? Can someone have both light and dark within? Can you truly attain balance within this set dichotomy? Oh, and Leia's carrying the hope of the Resistance on her shoulders, a heavy burden that drives Poe to act rashly, and it could spell end for their entire movement.
This sounds great, Ryan. But what about Finn?
Finn?
Yeah, the third noob we introduced in the last film.
Oh, well, you see, there's this casino world, and he has to get to a locksmith to help Poe in his quest, yeah, and he befriends a nobody from the Resistance, and we can play a love triangle, because who doesn't love those?
I think you may need to work on the last bit, but I don't know, maybe tie into his leanings as a slave from the First Order. You may be able to draw some nice parallels there and make it work. We are sold!
Finn's plot, though finally acted by all parties, just felt out of place, rushed, and brought the film down with it. And being that it took up 45 minutes of the movie, it really was noticeable. Well, why didn't Finn's stuff work? I think it has to do with J.J. Abrams' approach to character when he set out to develop the new trilogy. This brings us to the problem of Abrams' mystery box. Abrams often sneaks a mystery box into his works. Hell, in Lost, it was a literal box with the whole Hatch subplot that took up much of the back half of the first season. His theory is that if you have a mystery box, you have within your story unlimited potential to tap. This is why The Force Awakens was filled with mystery boxes guised as characters. Who is Rey? Where does she come from? Who are her parents? Who is Finn? Who is Snoke? Why does Maz Kanata have Skywalker's lightsaber, etc.? The filmmakers had a problem developing places for Finn to go because he didn't have much character to offer. Again, this is no slight on John Boyega, who plays him fabulously in both this picture and the last. It is a flaw within the writing, because when you often leave so much potential to tap, you find often that you have really little to go on. This was very apparent. it also leads to many other problems that some people will not be willing to forgive. What I write next will contain spoilers. Skip ahead for spoilers. This whole review is spoiler laden, so I don't care. The other problem with the mystery box approach is that when you open the box after it has been built up, you might come away feeling underwhelmed. This film does explore many of the questions raised above. Some I'm very okay with, and some I'm not as much. Rey's parentage played insanely well for me. I know some people will be furious, but I found it refreshing that she is not the product of someone we knew from before. Not everybody has to be related. Why does this franchise have to follow lineage? Let's talk about Snoke. For some, he will seem a pointless character. I fear we may never learn his backstory. It made for a surprising scene, but made the same mistake the Phantom Menace did. Rather than developing this really rich villain, you sliced him in half for the sake of shock. Why was he in this new trilogy? He now stands out as an eyesore. Oh, and speaking of repeated mistakes, Captain Phasma. They Return of the Jedi to us all over again. She is absolutely the new Boba Fett. Badass looking to the extreme, but profoundly superfluous. If you were going to kill her without further character exploration, why not just keep her dead? As that is where we all assume she was at the end of the previous film. Welcome to the land of missed opportunities. It was almost as if she was there solely to sell more toys. And speaking of selling toys, the Porgs are the new Ewoks, am I right? Spoilers done. With all this being said, this film works well. The largest reason for this stems from 3 performances. Daisy Ridley, Adam Driver, breathe fresh air and life into characters that could easily have been wooden and trite as they were in the last movie. Ridley is especially captivating in this film as she seeks to unravel the truth of the divide between Kylo and Luke. And I will just say, Mark Hamill for the win. This man took a character that we all know and deep dove into him to display something new, vulnerable, and damn right magnetic. This really is the performance of his career. Just as Ford owned the previous film, Hamill, and to a lesser extent Fisher, deliver grand performances that rekindle your love with this series. Fisher is delightful to watch and shares a scene with Hamill that moved me to tears, but this is Hamill's movie. He owns it, and it is he that cements for the audience why they have come to see these movies for so many years. And that is my opening night review of The Last Jedi. One that I stand by, but not as wholeheartedly as I stood by my review of The Force Awakens. If you watch my listen to my review of The Force Awakens from opening night, there's, I think with the exception of the characterization of Han Solo, nothing that I don't stand by 100% in that review. This one, expectation had a lot to do with, because I listened to the fanboys online. I went onto YouTube and I listened to all the people that were like, she's a Skywalker, she's a Kenobi, she's Anakin reincarnate. All this kind of stuff. I listened to it and I bought into it. Particularly with the Snoke stuff and Darth Plagueis. The thing is, I think that the Darth Plagueis thing, if right before Adam Driver Snoke in half, he had just been like, you knew me as another name, Darth Plagueis, some called me. Fanboys would have been perfectly satisfied and they wouldn't have that comment to, slam at this movie. He's a wasted character. And the whole point of his death was that he was completely pointless. In the previous movie, he added nothing outside of to create an overhead for the big bad, which is the Adam Driver character. Why did we need an overhead to begin with? Why? It was just repeating the same thing that happened in the last one. Why couldn't the main motivating character of villainy in the film be just the main character answering to no one. Well, that's because it makes a redemption arc harder to tell. And that's true, 100%. But why does there need to be another redemption arc? We watched a whole trilogy about that. We watched a whole sexology about that. What is it? A sexology? Is that what it is? Whatever. We watched it. There were 6 of them. Redemption arc. We didn't need it. And Rian Johnson knew that. He looked at what the trajectory of the story was and saw what was going to happen was going to play out exactly as it had before. We were going to have Rey go to Luke. Luke was going to teach her the ways of the Force. She was going to try and go and redeem Kylo Ren. And why? Because that's what this franchise wants. But isn't what the franchise needs. All the way back in my Empire Strikes Back review, I said that the greatest twist in cinema history was the reveal of Darth Vader, which was a blessing to that movie, to that trilogy, but a curse for the franchise, because it's not something they've been able to move away from since then. The moment that happened, the archetypal hero that Luke Skywalker was became a family lineage storyline that you had to tether yourself to, and that wasn't the story originally told. That wasn't even the original plan. No matter what Lucas has put out there in the zeitgeist of popular culture, that was never the initial plan. If you read the early drafts, like there was Anakin and Luke, and they were they were twins, and then like there's a multitude of different versions of that, and Anakin and Darth Vader were 2 completely separate characters in early versions of his screenplay. He was molding it and changing it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But that was never a part of the story. It made for an amazing twist, and one that worked well within the narrative of the 2 films that existed at the time, and one you could work with to create a really rousing and radical conclusion to a perfect trilogy of films. I get the use of it there. And the prequels then had this rich story to dive into of how does a good Jedi turn evil. And so you can tie that in. But then going into this one, why did you need to dive into the same narrative? You could have worked with the family lineage of Skywalker or Solo or Organa or whoever you wanted to. Antilles if you wanted to. Hell, like it just needed to be somebody from the original franchise, right? You could do Calrissians. I get it's the Skywalker saga, so you needed to have it tie in there, but why do you need to tell the same exact story that we've already seen? Rian Johnson knew this and understood this. And so that's why he eliminated the character of Snoke. I think most people would have been perfectly satisfied if Snoke had a throwaway line where he was like, I once went by a different name, just like I said before. I think people would not hurl that at his character in this movie any further. And it's an excellent performance, really one of the strongest performances from, why am I forgetting his name? Little Gollum. Andy Serkis. Excellent actor who's given many amazing performances, and he's so good in this movie. In the previous movie, he was just arch-villain who said arch-villainy things, and that's it. This, he had a bit of a character, and I like how he brought Adam Driver down to his knees and made him look pathetic, and that's hard to do. Adam Driver's charismatic AF. And I like how he plays this character, because in this one, he's not a whining retread of Anakin. He's got texture to him that is uniquely his own, independent of Darth Vader, even though you can tell he wants to be it. And that worked better for me in this film, because you saw different flavor to him than you saw in the previous film. He is so effing good in this franchise. In this film in specific, he is amazing. The other thing that people hurl at this movie unfairly is the characterization of Luke. Luke was never my favorite character. Never once. I liked him, but he was the most vanilla character of the original franchise, who has grown to be my favorite character because of how I re-examined him over time and with this movie. I like that they changed nothing about Luke that you hadn't already seen. In Return of the Jedi, the moment he declares himself a Jedi, what's the first thing he does? He says, "No, Your Highness, I'm a Jedi, like my father before me." And before he says that epic line, he throws the lightsaber away. He declares himself a Jedi in that moment. And it is jaw-dropping. And in that moment, he also throws the Jedi away. Because I think Luke, and this is something that has been not necessarily retconned, but you could read the scene differently now. When he says, "You failed, Your Highness, I'm a Jedi like my father before me," and throws the sword, you can read that as, "I'm a Jedi just like my father was. And we, just like my father, reject the Jedi, reject the Sith, and I'm going to put that aspect of the Force behind me and discover something new." And what's the first thing that Luke does in this movie? He gets his old lightsaber back, and he throws it over his shoulder. He does the exact same thing he did last time you saw him holding a lightsaber. When people hurl that at this movie, that's not Luke, he wouldn't just throw the lightsaber away, that's literally the last thing he did in the previous movies when he was holding a lightsaber. So you can't throw that at this movie. It just doesn't work. Yes, it's played for a brief bit of comedy, but really what you're upset at is that your expectation wasn't there. Your expectation was that he was going to grab that laser sword and be like, all powerful. But if he was all-powerful Luke, if he was the Luke consistent with how you wanted him in the original trilogy, how he was in Hope, Empire, and Jedi, let's examine Empire for a second. What did he do when his friends were in danger? What did he do when he saw Han screaming in pain after Vader is torturing him? He dropped what he was doing, and he ran there to save him and protect him. So if you want that version of Luke, you were never going to get it. Because JJ chose not to include Luke in that movie. He chose to use the character of Luke Skywalker as nothing more than a MacGuffin. And that leaves one of two things. That either means that Luke saw and felt in the Force that Kylo was going to kill Han Solo. He knew it, he felt it, and he allowed it to happen. Or he detached himself from the Force. I think it's more in line with character that Luke would detach himself from the Force than not be there to help his friend. And I feel like that's something that gets forgotten. Also, the last time Luke held that blue lightsaber of his father's, he had no idea what that lightsaber meant or what it did. He had no idea at that moment, when he was using that lightsaber lightsaber was the same lightsaber that cut through children, the younglings. When you discover that the weapon that you behold so important to you because it was something of your father's was used to commit mass genocide against the very religion that you practice and the practitioners of that religion, you might feel differently towards that weapon. Am I right? You won't hold that thing as a divine entity anymore. So, yeah, it's completely forgivable that Luke throws it over his shoulder. And I like that what Luke does is he tries to teach her that there's more than one way to look at the Force. This whole film builds on the idea that there doesn't have to be just Jedi and Sith. The Force, if it truly is everywhere, it surrounds us and binds us. It holds the galaxy together, as Obi-Wan said. That means that everybody should have access to the Force and understand it in different ways. People based on their damn midichlorians, might have different manipulation of how they use that force, but the character of Chirrut in Rogue One is a prime example of, this is a guy who has at least some incredibly limited access to the force without being able to be a practitioner of it, necessarily. He, to me, doesn't seem like he is a Jedi. He's not a practicer of being a Jedi, but maybe he's a practicer of a different variant of religion within the same universe. There doesn't have to be just the two. And I like the character of Rose and her sister having that little crescent pendant that suggests there is other religions out there completely untapped. Like, we have other access to worlds and religions and practices and different weapons and different ideas of what the Force could be based on the suggestion of that with this character. Or Snoke, who very clearly is like damning of the Sith. He does not respect them and he ridicules them, just as he does the Jedi. Yet he is very firmly capable of using the Force. That is compelling as well. At least in this film, he was certainly not a tie to Palpatine in any way. Spoiler alert for future movies. He was his own thing. And I was excited to maybe learn a little bit more of that. What was he? What did he practice? Did he practice the same thing that the girl who died? I can't remember Rosa's sister's name. I drawn a blank. I really, as I said, liked that aspect of the film. But that was compelling to me, and I like that Luke was trying to teach her that you can have access to the Force even if you want to. You don't have to be a Jedi. Maybe it is time for the Jedi to end. And I thought the trajectory that we were going was we were going to see Rey establish a new order. Not of Jedi, not of Sith, a new something. And I thought maybe we would learn, because this was called the Skywalker Saga, and we find out in the film that she's not a Skywalker, that she was going to establish herself as Rey, who's a practitioner of Skywalker. The family lineage who turned their backs on both the Sith and the Jedi, and were their own individual agents of the Force. And she was going to be a practitioner under them. That is not the story we would end up getting, but the promise of that in this film was really compelling. Every single scene with Luke, Mark Hamill is so goddamn good. The 3 lessons are outstanding. Lesson 1, where he teaches her that there's so much more than the good and the bad, and the fact that you need the good and the bad in order to coexist. And it's Jedi hubris that thinks that they are able to be overarching of that. Like, that was beautiful to me. The second one, where he is unveiling what happened with Darth Sidious's plan and how he converted Anakin to the dark side, and she rebounds with him having like cured his father, but then how he, even though he rejected the dark side in that moment, had a momentary slip up that led to this new order. When he practices the Force, when he uses his visions of the future, bad things happen. And he felt the hatred in that boy, and for a momentary relapse, he thought about taking this boy's life, ignited his sword, thought better of it, but the boy saw. And it was painful. Then we have the final lesson, and the brief little combat scene where Luke accesses the Force in a traditional way to like hold himself up when she bests him in the sword fight is great, because you see her momentary rage as she leans close in on him. All of that is beautifully shot, beautifully choreographed. It's a subtle lightsaber fight in that she's the only one with a lightsaber and he's using a stick to like just beat at her. but I think that's one of the best choreographed scenes with a lightsaber in all of the franchise. And it's something like 45 seconds long, but it's so damn good. And then she realizes that he isn't what they need, and he has that epic line earlier, like, "What do you think is going to happen? That I'm just going to walk out on the field, on the battlefield with a laser sword and bring you all to victory?" Like, that's the stuff of stories. That's not what actually happens in a fight, and I like that because it plays out later. The confrontation between Rey and Kylo. I was a big fan of how they had this weird connection where they kept like mind melding with each other. It was a unique aspect of the Force that I didn't think was out of character, because if Luke can go into and see Han being hurt and Leia being hurt in Empire Strikes Back, why, if they're two Force users who are actively using the Force, wouldn't they be able to connect with each other in that way and maybe see each other? That didn't seem too far of a stretch for me. I know that that's something a lot of people didn't like, but it's also not unprecedented. If you've read like any of the Legends comics, that shit kind of happens sometimes. But anyway, moving on, he tries to lure her into joining his side after he turns his back on on Snoke and declares himself the arch leader of the bad guys, and tries to get her to join him, and she says no. That whole scene where they're back-to-back lightsaber fighting is amazing and so oh my god, it's great. And I think that's pretty much, even if you don't like that, this movie, you like that scene. So I'm not going to touch on that too much outside of, hot damn, that was excellently choreographed, beautifully shot. The look of this movie is the best looking Star Wars movie, I would argue. You could, I think the three best looking movies are The Empire Strikes Back, this movie, and weirdly, Rise of Skywalker. We'll touch on that later. But this movie, for my money, is my favorite looking Star Wars movie. And the mise-en-scene in this film is just so good. Let's touch on Poe. A lot of people don't like the Poe storyline because it could all be resolved if Haldo just, told him the plan. But we've established this character is willing to go out on his own and sacrifice as many people as he thinks necessary in order to win the day. If you are a leader and have just reprimanded this person for doing such actions, why on earth would you trust him with this incredibly secret plot to create an escape route for your insanely small group of survivors, as well as the sacrifice of their leader? Doesn't make sense to me, and it never did, that he would have been told this plan. She could say something like, "I've got a plan," or something like that. Like I've heard people say, well, she didn't have to say the exact plan, but she could have told him that there was a plan. Why would he have believed her? He had already believed her to be working against them. So why would he have believed her with that? He wouldn't have. And I don't think he would have believed her if she had told him the plan, because he was acting reckless, and he needed to learn to act not reckless. And that is his whole point in the story. There's a lot of these rogue characters you get in Star Wars that are deified because they win the day, but at a cost. And this film truly examines the cost as never before. And a lot of people also hurl criticisms at the light speed tracking and whatnot. I just want to draw your attention to the Star Wars radio drama from 1981. This is a retelling of the original Star Wars movie, A New Hope, as radio drama format, the only two actors of which who lent their voices were Mark Hamill and Anthony Daniels, reprising their roles. Everybody else wasn't. But in that radio drama, Darth Vader's ship tracks the Antilles ship in the beginning from the opening scene using hyperdrive. He tracked her through that. So this is established continuity that was put into a radio drama, publicly released, and you can listen to it on YouTube, back in 1981. So take that continuity and shove it up your butt, because it's been there for like 40 years at this point. Booyah. Where's I going with this? I like the stuff. People will also hurl their comments about Leia floating. It does look a touch silly, but I love that scene. She's my favorite character, my absolute favorite Star Wars character, and when I thought she had died, it just still felt too soon to me, because she had died less than a year beforehand in real life, and seeing her killed on screen broke my heart. I knew to expect it, but when I saw that she wasn't dead and she pulled herself out of it, my heart swelled, and I absolutely teared up, and I thought it was so beautiful. And I don't care that she silly slides through the thing. There is established precedence in this franchise of weird silly slides, like Luke is falling down in Empire Strikes Back and does the weird trajectory fall into the tiny little hole. Okay, he used the Force there too. It's established within this family. They get blasted and fly weird towards things. She did look a touch Mary Poppinsy. I get it. I don't care. I loved that moment. It was beautiful. She doesn't get the praise sung for her that she should. Carrie Fisher gives, for my money, the best performance she gave in any movie ever in this movie. She is so good because you can feel the hopelessness within her. Her vibrancy in the original trilogy, even when they were potentially losing, she had a feisty energy and she was going to win. And in this film, you feel for the first time that she doesn't necessarily believe that. She still has that feisty energy, but she feels beaten down by it rather than uplifted by it. And that's what this movie needed. And she doesn't ever lose that hope up until one of her final scenes in the film, and that's when Luke shows up. I'll touch on that scene in a minute because it's my favorite scene in the movie. In the original opening night, and I think this is the problem when we review things too early, I would challenge anybody who doesn't like this movie to have stepped away from it for a few years and then revisit and see if they don't change their mind on some of the things that bother them. I think that expectations have so much to do with it, and I've addressed some of the expectation problems versus the reality of the film that we got already. But then there's another problem, where you watch something and it doesn't seem to play for you in the moment, but when you watch it a second time, having seen the full picture unfold, you see things and it kind of contextualizes moments and gives scenes that seem out of place a little more merit. The scenes that I liked the least opening night was all the casino stuff with Finn and Rose. Rose, I think, is a tremendous character who, opening night, I gave little thought to. I thought she was, like Kelly Marie Tran, gave an excellent performance, as I kept singing the praises of John Boyega as well, but it just didn't really gel for me. Having seen the picture as a whole, and freeing the species who are forced to run to then run of their own free will, run to freedom, and how that parallels with John Boyega's character, who's a character who is only running and then decides to run towards something that matters, which for these animals it was freedom, for him it's towards the resistance, was moving. And that's not something you get watching the first time. I like the politics of that scene as well. And I mentioned them, that I felt that they were a little forced, and I do think they're forced, but no better or worse than they were forced in the prequel trilogy, which a lot of people are critical of, but I'm a little less so. And I've come to really like the subplot, and I don't think that the film overstays its welcome. It does the first time you're watching because you're so invested in seeing what's going to happen with Luke, Kylo, Rey, and Leia that you want to just get back to that story. And every time you pull out to follow them, it feels like you're losing the thing that you're interested in. But once you know the whole thing and have seen it and play it back, it doesn't bother you anymore, or it didn't me. This is something that I really like in the movie. It's something that I enjoy watching, and the push in when you first get to the inside the casino and the casino planet is really cool because they do this excellent visual quote to the film Wings, which was the first Academy Award winning Best Picture from 1927. I want to say 27, I think. There's an excellent visual quote, and I encourage you to watch that scene and then watch the movie Wings and see if you pick up at the exact moment I'm talking about. It's very deliberately done and pretty brilliant, and it's a great, like, tracking shot. Okay, if I touched on the things I want to touch on. John Williams' music, for my money, this is the best he does with the sequel trilogy in this movie. I think the new themes he develops are great. The use of the Leia theme twinged my heart, and Rey's theme and the new Rey Skywalker theme that was established in the final scene of the previous movie really builds into something new and magnetic in here, and I love it. I think this is his best work he had done. This is currently his best work that he has done in the past 15 years or so. I said that too about The Force Awakens. I think he did even better here. I was glad that he got a nomination for this movie as well. The last two scenes I want to talk about are my favorite two scenes, which is the scene where Luke and Leia get to have their moment. And it's beautiful. It's undercut with a tiny little joke about Leia's hair. And her performance, the first time you watch it, she just seems hopeless and whatnot, even upon seeing him. And she just tries to play it through a smile. And then Luke does his magic, goes and does the little nod to 3PO, goes out onto the battlefield. Watching it a second time, without changing anything in performance, you see how Carrie Fisher played that brilliantly, because she's not hopeless anymore. Seeing Luke is the hope she needs, and she is risen with hope. The smiles she offers him are authentic. The hopelessness that she feels isn't hopelessness, it's sadness, because she knows that her brother is sacrificing himself so she can win the day. And she is lamenting the loss of her savior, her only hope, if you will. And that's a beautiful scene. Makes me cry every time. Getting choked up thinking about it now. That is the best scene in any Star Wars movie ever. Without question, that is it. Luke out on the battlefield is amazing because he gives this world what they need. He doesn't want to be this hero. He never set out to be a hero. He wanted to get off of his own home turf so he could make something of himself, and you watch this extraordinary journey of what he did. And he became a hero and did heroic things because he believed himself capable of it, but his goal wasn't to be an icon for the world. That's something that we made him. And this movie is very much a meta commentary of Star Wars as much as it is within the narrative of its own feature. Luke never was the thing that we have put him on this pedestal of being. He never was. Go back, watch the original trilogy. He's really not that guy. He's the whiny kind of loser in the first two movies who comes in and reluctantly saves the day because he needs to save his family. Because he needs to believe that he didn't waste his life believing his father was something different than he was. That is why he acts the way he does. He's not ultra-heroic. He's not a smooth Jedi like any of the ones in the prequels. He's sloppy. But because he destroyed the Empire, he became the figurehead of, like, this majestical being. This man on a pedestal, this icon. So much so that when they see him on the battlefield, they all go, "Is that Luke Skywalker?" It's amazing. It's magical. It's a moment that gives you the goosebumps. And he goes out there and gives everybody the Luke that they expected. I want every man to shoot that man on the field. Every gun, fire, fire. And then he gets shot and you see the... In the most amazing scene, the dust settles. You got him? That whole thing. And then Luke just walks out and blows the dust away. It is the most badass moment in, like, the past 10 years. That was the coolest thing I had ever seen. I was like, just, oh my god. And the film is brilliant because the confrontation between Luke and Kylo, or Ben, is Luke just being the teacher. The teacher that Rey needed him to be, that he refused to be. It's the teacher that Kylo needs, but doesn't know he needs, and is trying to do everything he can to, move away from. And I like how he keeps layering in the stuff about the father and stuff, and the importance of fatherhood, because that's what drove Luke, and that's what drives Kylo. He sees himself as a parable of himself, of what he could have turned out himself. And that whole scene is great. Right to the moment where he cuts him in half, but he's not there. And some people are completely lost on that. That is Star Wars canon. Rian Johnson proved it. He went on that excellent, I think it was Twitter post or TikTok or whatever it was he did, where he just walked through his house up to his bookshelf, pulled the Book of the Jedi out, a previously published book from the Legends era, turned to the page, pointed to the picture of where he got that idea of how to use that power. It was brilliant, trolling of the trolls. And he used his last bit of life to give the galaxy what they needed and the audience what we needed, which was the Luke Skywalker icon that we expected and wanted. Without betraying the character that he became, Luke became a pacifist and didn't lift a muscle in order to defeat the bad guys at the end and win the day. His pacifism was never betrayed. This movie gives you the ending you expected and you needed without betraying character or progression. It's the most perfect ending ever, in my mind. And watching Luke, as he's dying, see the twin sons, was beautiful to me, and I cried like a baby when I saw that. It was literally the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in this franchise, and did not expect to be so moved by this movie. And then the movie continues for one more scene, just one more scene. You find out that Leia and Rey have the books. She can be tuteled the way she needs to as a Jedi if she just so chooses that path. And you find out that there are other Force-sensitive people out there with Broom Boy. But before Broom Boy does that, he's talking about the legend of Luke Skywalker, playing with his toys, just as we did when we watched the first movie and saw how Luke saved the day by blowing up that Death Star, and we went out and we got these toys and we played with our own Luke Skywalkers and had him go out there on the battlefield to fight the bad guys and save the day. It's beautiful meta commentary, and it is so perfect. The one last scene that I didn't talk about is the whole point of this film, which is everybody says this film is about let the past die. That is not what the point of this film is. That's what Kylo Ren believes. And it's very easy to listen to the narrative the villains put out there, and because they're flashy and they're strong and generally aggressive, but that's not ultimately what any movie is trying to say. You don't listen to what the bad guys have to say to get the moral messaging of your film. Listen to what the good guys have to say. And in the most stunning debut, we get Puppet Yoda back for the first time since 1983 or 1999 if you count that Puppet Yoda that has been retconned out of existence, rightfully so, because he was terrifying. You get Puppet Yoda back to deliver Luke one last message, one last lesson, which is that we are what they are. We are their masters, but the whole point of teaching somebody is so that they can outgrow you. Be the person that you needed when you were younger, and they're going to grow up to be the person that the next generation needs. And they do that because we learn from our mistakes. The whole Jedi Order, Luke is right, and Yoda affirms, is a mistake. The way that they did that did lead to the rise of the Empire. The way they conducted themselves. But they didn't learn from the mistakes. Nobody has, and Skywalker is guilty of this as well. You teach all sides, not just one aspect, one dogmatic point of view. And Rey is the one that understands that, and in a weird way, Kylo is too, whether he knows it or not. And the scene with Luke and Yoda is just beautiful, and it's one of the best written scenes. That whole message that he sends is excellent, because failure genuinely is the most important lesson that we can ever learn, because we often do learn from failure. We just don't often preach that we've learned from failure. And some people let their failures get the better of them, and they wilt away, as Luke did in this film. I think this film is perfect. This is a 4-star movie. Back in the day, I also gave it 4 stars. I said it was like genuinely almost a perfect movie. It just stops dead for about a half an hour. And that's something that I don't hold true to anymore. I think this movie is great. Daisy Ridley, Adam Driver, Carrie Fisher, and especially Mark Hamill gave performances that I think stand as their best performances across their career within the Star Wars franchise, and with the exception of Adam Driver, the other 3, this is the best performance they've ever given in their career. I think Adam Driver gave a minutely better performance, and when I say minutely, I mean an incredibly better performance in Marriage Story, which I might talk about someday. But those 4 are stunning in this film, and I love that this film sat down and it really applied character and character progression and learning to each one. When I came out of The Force Awakens, I just felt that Rey was the Luke character, Finn was the Han character, Poe was a nothing character that I guess kind of is like Leia, and BB-8 is the R2-D2, and R2-D2 isn't there, and 3PO is the same guy, and Han became the character he was 30 years before, and Leia was there sometimes as well. It wasn't much. There was no growth, nothing. The characters were just cardboard. This film gives them so much texture. Rey is a fully blossoming person in this film. And I loved her character in this movie. I loved Poe. We got to see character progression there. We got to see emergent character progression with Finn. However, I do think of the characters, he is the one that kind of gets short shrift the most in the entirety of the franchise, but in this movie as well. I liked the character of Rose. I loved where we went with Leia. Leia had character in this film. And it wasn't just the same character as before, or recharacterization that came in from the past. It was her own unique character. Same thing with Luke. It wasn't like they did with Han Solo and just like, people love Han Solo from Empire. I'm going to give you the Han Solo from Empire. Be gone with his character progression from Return of the Jedi and beyond. We'll just take him back to being the same man he was when you liked him. And it made for a cool series of scenes with that character in the movie, but it really is kind of like disastrous to his character in general. Leia and Luke progressed, and it was beautiful to me. Kylo went from being a copycat of Anakin Skywalker to declaring himself his own agent in his own story. And that was awesome. So yeah. This movie is great. For my money, this is my favorite Star Wars movie. I will also say that A New Hope and Empire Strikes Back are also my favorite Star Wars movie for very different reasons. But I think these are the three films that you could argue are the best Star Wars film. Yeah, this movie is perfect. If you've made it all the way here, like, pin a rose on you, man. Thanks for listening. Drop down in the comments below what you thought of the movie. I've heard all the different complaints a billion times over, and I think a lot of them are just kind of asinine, in all honesty. Like, the amount of stuff you could hurl at the other good Star Wars movies is like huge, yet nobody does. This movie, they attack because it has very overt statements and stances that it's trying to make, which the other Star Wars movies are a little more subtle with. And I don't see a problem with having an outright specific stance, even if it's a stance I don't agree with. One of my favorite movies has a political statement in it that I completely disagree with, and that would be Aliens. I might even do a whole video on Aliens someday, on how I love that movie but politically don't agree with it at all. So you can like a movie that you don't necessarily agree with politically, but don't lambaste it just because it says something very definitively. Movies are statements. Movies are the exclamation points. If you want ellipses, that's what television is for. Or question marks. That's what a television show is. Movies are statements. Movies are the period at the end of the sentence, or like I said, an exclamation point. And this movie very much is an exclamation point. It has, for the first time in a Star Wars movie in a long time, something very specific to say. Force Awakens had nothing to say, nothing of use, other than, we're back, baby! That's about it. So, thanks for watching. I've overstayed my welcome, so I'm gonna see myself out. Next month, we're gonna talk about Solo, so stay tuned for that. I have thoughts. So thanks for watching. Rian Johnson, you're a rock star. I'm sorry that the internet destroyed you.